The wedding invitation arrived on a rainy Thursday morning inside a thick ivory envelope stamped with gold lettering so expensive it almost looked arrogant. Ethan Brooks stared at it in silence while standing beside the tiny kitchen counter of his modest apartment in Seattle. Cartoon music echoed softly from the living room where his 8-year-old daughter Sophie sat wrapped in a blanket, eating cereal before school. For several seconds, he did not touch the envelope. He simply looked at the name written across the front in elegant cursive handwriting he would have recognized anywhere. Olivia Carter. Even after 7 years, the sight of her name still carried the strange power to stop his breathing for a moment. Sophie noticed the change in his face almost immediately. "Daddy," she asked quietly, "are you okay?" Ethan slowly picked up the envelope and forced a calm smile. "Yes, sweetheart." But his voice sounded distant. Careful, like a man stepping near an old wound he thought had already healed. He opened the envelope and unfolded the invitation with steady hands. "Olivia Carter and Nathaniel Vaughn request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration at the Grand Meridian Coastal Resort in Monterey, California." Ethan read the sentence twice. Then he noticed the handwritten note beneath the printed text. "Hope life has treated you kindly, Ethan. It would mean so much to see you there after all these years. Olivia." The corners of Ethan's mouth almost moved into a smile, but not because the message touched him, because he knew Olivia too well. She had never done anything halfway. Not love, not ambition, not cruelty, especially not cruelty disguised as elegance. Across the country, Olivia sat in a luxury bridal suite overlooking the Pacific Ocean while her bridesmaids laughed around her beneath golden afternoon sunlight. "Do you really think he'll come?" one of them asked. Olivia leaned back in her chair, her diamond engagement ring catching the light. "Oh, he'll come," she said confidently. "Men like Ethan always come back when they realize what they lost." Another bridesmaid smirked. "Didn't he end up broke or something?" Olivia pretended to hesitate before answering. "Last I heard, single dad. Working random jobs. Barely surviving." She said it casually, but something beneath her smile did not look like happiness. It looked personal, old, bitter. 7 years earlier, Ethan Brooks had once been the only man Olivia believed she would ever marry. Back then, they were young, exhausted, and desperately trying to survive in San Francisco. While Olivia fought through law school, Ethan worked endless shifts repairing elevators, driving deliveries, and doing construction work just to keep them afloat. He used to leave handwritten notes in her textbooks before exams. He used to stay awake waiting for her after midnight classes with cheap takeout food because he knew she forgot to eat when stressed. He sold his late father's watch to pay 1 semester of her tuition when she secretly could not afford it. Olivia never knew. Ethan never told her. But love became difficult once ambition entered the room. Olivia wanted more than survival, more than cramped apartments and overdue bills, and watching Ethan fall asleep sitting upright at the kitchen table because he worked 3 jobs in one day. She wanted luxury, stability, power. And when Nathaniel Vaughn appeared, polished suits, expensive restaurants, promises of a glamorous future, Olivia began looking at Ethan differently. Less like a partner, more like a weight tied to her ankle. The night she left him still lived inside Ethan's memory with painful clarity. Rain hit the windows while Olivia stood beside packed luggage near the apartment door. "Love doesn't pay bills, Ethan," she whispered coldly. "I can't spend my life drowning beside you." Ethan remembered not fighting her, not yelling, not begging. He only nodded once and stepped aside so she could leave with dignity. Because loving someone deeply sometimes meant letting them go before they learned to hate you. Olivia mistook his silence for weakness. Most people did. The week of the wedding arrived quickly. The Grand Meridian Coastal Resort looked like something designed for royalty. White marble staircases overlooked the ocean cliffs. Crystal chandeliers glowed through towering glass walls, while luxury cars lined the circular entrance. Politicians, investors, celebrities, and wealthy executives filled the resort with expensive perfume and louder egos. Olivia moved through the chaos in a custom designer gown, while photographers followed her constantly. Everyone admired her. Everyone envied her. And yet every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the guest entrance. Waiting. Curious. "You really want this Ethan guy here that badly?" Nathaniel asked while adjusting his tuxedo cufflinks. Olivia smiled lightly. "I just think closure is healthy." Nathaniel laughed. "Closure? I spent years with him, she replied. It'll be satisfying seeing how differently our lives turned out. Nathaniel kissed her forehead distractedly. Well, if your sad little ex actually shows up, I hope he enjoys the view from the back tables. Olivia smiled again, because that part had already been arranged. Table 37. Near the catering hallway beside the temporary kitchen entrance where servers carried trays back and forth all evening. Every seat near Ethan's table belonged to distant relatives, divorced acquaintances, and guests Nathaniel considered socially unimportant. Olivia personally approved the arrangement. She imagined Ethan sitting there alone in an old suit, quietly humiliated while watching her dance beneath chandeliers beside a billionaire husband. The image gave her a cruel sense of satisfaction she tried not to examine too closely. By sunset, the wedding venue shimmered like a scene from a movie. Live string musicians played near fountains covered in white roses while hundreds of guests gathered beneath glowing lanterns beside the ocean cliffs. Then someone near the entrance frowned. A black SUV rolled slowly toward the front gates. Then another. Then another. 3 identical matte black Escalades stopped in perfect sequence outside the main entrance. Conversations began fading. Valets exchanged confused looks. "Who the hell is that?" someone whispered. The first vehicle door opened. 2 men stepped out wearing dark tailored suits and discreet earpieces. Not flashy security. Professional security. The kind that moved with military precision instead of intimidation. Another man exited the second SUV. Then another. The atmosphere changed instantly. Even wealthy people recognized real power when they saw it. Nathaniel frowned. Did we invite a senator or something? Olivia turned toward the entrance casually at first. Then her expression froze. Ethan Brooks stepped out of the final SUV, holding his daughter's hand. Silence moved through the crowd, almost physically. Ethan wore a perfectly tailored black suit. No flashy logos. No jewelry. No attempt to impress anyone. But nothing about him resembled the exhausted, struggling man Olivia remembered. He moved calmly, controlled, quiet in the way dangerous storms are quiet before impact. Sophie walked beside him in a cream-colored dress, her small hand wrapped comfortably around his fingers while her eyes widened at the massive resort lights. Ethan paused briefly beside the vehicles while one bodyguard leaned close and murmured something. Ethan nodded once. The man stepped back immediately. Olivia felt something cold slide through her chest. Not attraction, not anger, uncertainty. For the first time in years, she could not read Ethan Brooks. Guests began whispering everywhere. Who is he? Why does he have security? Wait, isn't that Olivia's ex? Nathaniel forced a laugh. Okay, that's dramatic. But his voice lacked confidence. Ethan and Sophie began walking toward the entrance together while conversations parted around them naturally. Not because Ethan demanded attention, because he never looked around searching for approval. That confidence unsettled people more than arrogance ever could. Sophie looked up at him softly. Daddy, why is everyone staring at us? Ethan glanced down with the faintest smile. Because sometimes people confuse silence with weakness. Olivia's stomach tightened unexpectedly hearing his voice again after all these years. Calm, deep, unshaken, not the voice of a broken man. Several old college friends immediately recognized Ethan. Holy hell, one man muttered. He actually came. Another woman laughed quietly. I heard he was barely making rent somewhere. Maybe the security guys are Uber drivers, someone joked. A few people chuckled. Ethan heard all of it. He simply kept walking. That somehow made the mockery feel smaller instead of larger. Olivia forced herself forward with practiced elegance. Ethan, she said smoothly. You made it. Ethan looked at her for several seconds before answering. Congratulations, Olivia. No bitterness. No jealousy. Somehow that disappointed her. She had expected emotion. Regret. Pain. Anything proving she still mattered enough to wound him. Instead, he stood before her like a man who had survived something much harder than heartbreak. Olivia looked toward Sophie. And this must be your daughter. Sophie smiled politely. Hi. She's beautiful, Olivia said automatically. Ethan nodded once. She's the best thing in my life. Something inside Olivia twisted painfully hearing that sentence because years ago Ethan once said those exact words about her. Nathaniel stepped forward confidently and extended his hand. Nathaniel Vaughn. Ethan shook it politely. Nathaniel immediately noticed the calluses on Ethan's hands. Not soft executive hands. Hands built. through work and hardship. Yet the expensive watch beneath Ethan's sleeve probably cost more than Nathaniel's car. Nathaniel smiled carefully. Interesting entrance. Ethan answered calmly. Long drive. Nathaniel laughed louder than necessary. Well, we're glad you could join us. Then the resort manager suddenly hurried toward Ethan with visible anxiety. Mr. Brooks, he said respectfully, we didn't realize you'd be arriving personally. If you'd prefer the private suite. Table 37 is fine. Ethan interrupted gently. The manager blinked. Sir, are you certain? Completely. Nathaniel and Olivia exchanged a quick glance. Ethan's expression never changed. The manager lowered his voice immediately. Of course, sir. Then he walked away looking nervous. Olivia felt another wave of discomfort. Nathaniel noticed it too. You know the manager? We've met before, Ethan answered simply. That silence became increasingly terrifying because every unanswered question made Ethan seem larger than the room itself. As dinner began, whispers spread through the ballroom like fire. Some guests claimed Ethan owned private military companies overseas. Others insisted he handled intelligence contracts. One investor quietly approached Nathaniel near the bar. You know who your fiancé invited tonight? Nathaniel smirked dismissively. An old boyfriend. The investor stared at him. That man's company handles executive protection for half the CEOs in Silicon Valley. Nathaniel's smile faded slowly. What company? Brooks Strategic International. Nathaniel frowned. Never heard of it. The investor gave a nervous laugh. That's the point. Across the ballroom, Ethan sat beside Sophie near the back tables exactly where Olivia intended him to be humiliated. Except somehow the entire room kept looking toward him anyway. Sophie quietly ate dessert while watching dancers beneath the chandeliers. Daddy, she whispered, are we important? Ethan looked at her warmly. No more important than anyone else. Then why do those men follow you? Ethan glanced briefly toward the bodyguards stationed discreetly around the ballroom perimeter. Because sometimes protecting peace requires preparation. Nearby guests pretended not to listen while hanging on to every word. Olivia watched Ethan constantly throughout the evening despite trying not to. The worst part was not his wealth, not the security, not the whispered rumors. It was his composure. Ethan should have looked broken sitting at the back of her wedding watching her marry another man. Instead, he looked like someone who had already conquered much darker things than humiliation. And for the first time since mailing the invitation, Olivia began wondering whether inviting Ethan Brooks had been the biggest mistake of her life. Later in the evening, guests moved toward the outdoor terrace where ocean wind drifted through hanging lights and soft jazz floated above the cliffs. Sophie stood near the railing watching waves crash against the rocks below, while Ethan rested one hand gently on her shoulder. Olivia found herself walking toward them before realizing she had even made the decision. Sophie noticed her first. Your dress is really pretty, she said sincerely. Olivia smiled softly despite herself. Thank you. Sophie tilted her head curiously. Daddy said you used to hate fancy dresses. Ethan gave a quiet sigh under his breath. Olivia stared at him. You told her about me. Not much, Ethan replied. Sophie nodded enthusiastically. He said you used to wear his hoodies and steal fries off his plate. Olivia felt her chest tighten unexpectedly. Tiny memories she had forgotten returned all at once. Cheap takeout on apartment floors. Burnt pancakes at 2 in the morning. Laughing while exhausted and broke and somehow still happy. Back then they had nothing except each other. And somehow they had still been happier than most. Wealthy couples Olivia knew now. Sophie, Ethan said gently, why don't you go see the dessert table? Her eyes widened immediately. Can I really? 1 cupcake. 2. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Sophie grinned. Worth trying. She ran off laughing. Olivia folded her arms slowly. She's adorable. Ethan nodded. She saved my life. Olivia looked at him quietly. You seem different. People usually become different after 7 years. That's not what I mean. He finally looked directly at her. You expected me to hate you, he said softly. Olivia froze because he was right. You expected me to walk in here bitter and broken so you could feel better about leaving. That's not fair, she whispered. Isn't it? She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no words came. Because somewhere deep down, she knew exactly why she sent the invitation. You know the strange part? Ethan said quietly. I was never angry that you left. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. How could you not be? Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. Because I knew what loving me looked like back then. Memories crashed through Olivia's mind. Ethan covered in dust after construction shifts. Ethan secretly skipping meals so she could afford textbooks. Ethan smiling through exhaustion because he never wanted her to feel guilty for dreaming bigger than their situation. Why didn't you ever tell me? She whispered. Tell you what? How much you were sacrificing. Ethan stared toward the ocean. Because love isn't supposed to feel like debt. The sentence hit harder than any accusation ever could. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Olivia finally asked the question she had carried all evening. Why did you really come tonight? Ethan thought about it before answering. Sophie wanted to see the ocean. Olivia almost laughed at the simplicity of it. And maybe, he admitted softly, part of me wanted to see if you were happy. Before she could answer, Nathaniel appeared beside them holding champagne glasses. There you are. His eyes immediately locked onto Ethan. You know, Nathaniel said casually, I still can't figure you out. Most people don't need to. Ethan replied. Nathaniel leaned closer. Guys in my world usually brag when they finally make money. You almost seem embarrassed by it. Money impresses insecure people. Ethan answered calmly. Safety impresses me. Nathaniel's smile faded slightly. Safety. Ethan nodded once towards Sophie inside the ballroom. Everything I built was for her. Olivia followed his gaze and suddenly realized something painful. Ethan had never chased power for ego. Everything about him revolved around protecting the people he loved. That was who he had always been. She simply failed to understand it. Then the ballroom doors opened. Conversation stopped instantly. A silver-haired woman entered surrounded by assistants and security personnel. Expressions changed immediately around the room. That's Victoria Hale, someone whispered. Nathaniel straightened immediately. He had spent years unsuccessfully trying to schedule a meeting with her foundation. Now she was walking directly into his wedding. Nathaniel approached confidently. Ms. Hale, what an incredible surprise. I know who you are, Victoria interrupted calmly. Then she walked past him without stopping. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as she crossed directly toward Ethan Brooks. Ethan rose calmly from his chair while Sophie smiled brightly. Miss Victoria. Victoria's severe expression softened immediately. There's my favorite negotiator. Daddy, let me have 2 cupcakes. Scandalous behavior, Victoria replied solemnly. Then she handed Ethan a thin black folder. The board wants your final decision tonight. Nathaniel stepped closer immediately. What board? Victoria looked at him directly. The board acquiring Von Urban Development. Silence hit the ballroom like a physical impact. Nathaniel blinked rapidly. Excuse me. Your investors approved the emergency acquisition proposal this afternoon. Nathaniel laughed nervously. That's impossible. Ethan closed the folder slowly. Not impossible, he said quietly. Just unfortunate timing. Nathaniel's face drained of color. You're buying my company? No. Ethan corrected calmly. I'm deciding whether it's worth saving. Whispers exploded across the ballroom. Olivia stared at Ethan as though seeing him for the first time. Nathaniel stepped closer aggressively. You planned this. I came here because your fiancé invited me. Then Victoria handed Ethan another document. He read it silently. For the first time all evening, a shadow crossed his face. What is it? Olivia asked before stopping herself. Ethan looked slowly toward Nathaniel. Federal investigators executed warrants in New York 2 hours ago. Nathaniel froze completely. Victoria continued calmly. Financial fraud, offshore laundering, illegal property seizures. The room erupted into chaos. Nathaniel snapped immediately. That's a lie. But nobody looked convinced anymore. Several members of his executive team had already accepted immunity deals. Nathaniel pointed furiously toward Ethan. You did this. Ethan's expression hardened slightly. No, he said quietly. You did. Then the ballroom doors opened again. This time 4 FBI agents entered alongside federal officers in formal suits. Music died mid-song. The lead agent approached Nathaniel directly. Nathaniel Vaughn, we have a federal warrant for your arrest regarding financial conspiracy, money laundering, and fraudulent acquisition practices. Gasps spread through the ballroom. Nathaniel backed away in disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. The agent remained calm. Sir, we've been investigating your organization for 14 months. Nathaniel pointed wildly toward Ethan. This is retaliation. The FBI agent never even looked at Ethan. Olivia stood frozen in her wedding dress, while federal agents handcuffed the man she was supposed to marry. Then another horrifying realization struck her. Ethan knew. All those years ago, Ethan had known. You knew, didn't you? She whispered shakily. Ethan stayed silent for several seconds before nodding once. I found out Nathaniel's investors were connected to illegal operations. Olivia stared at him in disbelief. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were already being watched. Her breath caught. The moment you started interning at Vaughn Legal Group, your name became attached to people I didn't trust. The room suddenly felt unreal. So you left me. Ethan finally looked directly into her eyes again. I disappeared because staying near you would have put you in danger. Olivia's knees nearly weakened beneath her gown. 7 years. 7 years believing Ethan abandoned her because he failed, when in reality, he had sacrificed his own future to protect hers. 2 months later, on a gray autumn afternoon in Seattle, Olivia finally gathered the courage to visit Ethan. She almost turned around 3 separate times before reaching the small lakeside cafe, where Sophie's piano recital was being held. Through the windows, she spotted Ethan immediately. Still calm, still quiet, still carrying that same grounded presence. Sophie noticed Olivia first and waved excitedly. Ethan turned slowly. For a moment, neither moved. Then Olivia approached carefully. Hi, she whispered. Hi, Olivia. No anger. That somehow made everything harder. Sophie rushed over happily. You came. I hope that's okay. Daddy said maybe you would. Olivia glanced at Ethan in surprise. Sophie wanted to send you an invitation, he admitted quietly. After the recital ended, Sophie ran outside toward the lake with friends while Ethan and Olivia remained beneath soft afternoon rain. Finally, Olivia whispered the words she should have said years ago. I'm sorry. Ethan stayed quiet. Not because you became successful. Not because Nathaniel was exposed. I'm sorry because I stopped seeing who you really were long before I left. You were young, Ethan said softly. No, Olivia answered painfully. I was selfish. Ethan did not argue. That honesty made the moment heavier. Why didn't you ever hate me? She asked. Ethan let out a faint breath. Because loving someone deeply doesn't disappear just because they hurt you. Tears burned in Olivia's eyes. For a long time, Ethan continued. I kept thinking maybe if life had been easier back then, maybe things would have ended differently. Olivia looked down at her trembling hands. Did you ever stop loving me? Ethan stayed silent long enough for the truth to already exist before he finally answered. No. Then he added quietly. But loving someone and returning to the past aren't always the same thing. Something inside her broke gently at those words. Not dramatic revenge. Not hatred. Just the quiet realization that some people love you honestly once and never belong to you again after you let them go. Suddenly Sophie came running back holding a paper drawing. Daddy, look. Ethan knelt immediately beside her. Olivia noticed all 3 figures in the drawing were holding hands beside the ocean. Sophie smiled innocently. I made this because sad people should still be friends. Ethan laughed softly while Olivia wiped tears from her face. Did I say something wrong? Sophie asked. No, sweetheart, Olivia whispered quickly. Ethan folded the drawing carefully and placed it inside his coat pocket. I think it's beautiful. Silence returned between the adults, but this time it felt lighter. Honest. Not healed completely, but honest. Olivia looked at Ethan one final time. Do you think people can forgive each other without getting the old life back? Ethan watched S, laughing near the lake as rain drifted softly across the water. Then he answered quietly. I think sometimes forgiveness is accepting that love existed, even if life moved in another direction. Olivia nodded slowly while tears slipped silently down her face. Ethan gently touched the pocket holding Sophie's drawing before looking toward the fading gray horizon. And for the first time in many years, neither of them felt trapped by the past anymore.